Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. I first encountered Jayne via Paris or Die, which I was given by the Saturday paper to review, and I loved it. And I kind of fell in love with Jayne, but I always knew I'd be second to Paris. I wasn't really going to have a big chance. The thing is about your love affair with Paris, it's amazing. And in Paris or Die, you fall in love with a Frenchman and you fall in love with the city, and then you have this incredibly bizarre accident. So to catch people up, I thought the first thing, I asked Jayne if she would just do a little reading, and it gives you a flavor of this book because I love the way My Sweet Guillotine, which kind of picks up on the story, you're coming back after this accident, you mix up like play script and prose, which is fabulous because a lot of what you were doing in Paris originally was studying at Jacques Lecoq theatre school as well. So to get people across with this accident and everything that happened, why don't you read the part in the little cafe or bar where you are telling your friends what happened, because they're like, what happened?
Sure, I'd love to. Is that working?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Page.
Hello. It's probably just my voice. I've got a good projection. Do you want me to? Voilà. Yes. The elevator closed on your head. All eyes are on me now. I take a swig of beer, smile, dissociate, and repeat the script with a light conversational air, though I'm burning with shame. Thank God for the acting training. Jayne. You know the old buildings here with the lifts in the middle of the staircases without protective enclosures around them? Nods, murmurs. Well, it was January. Paris was dark. My friend Sophie lives in a 1930s building in the 20th, and the lights were dim and the lift moved up and down in total silence, a finger's breadth from the banister. You could touch it. The protective barrier came just up to banister height, which was low, and I'm tall, plus I was wearing heels. Sophie's 4-year-old daughter Lou called me from below. We were playing a game of hide and seek. I was excited to see her after a lonely winter breaking up with my fiancé. I was calling to her, Lou! And she was calling to me, Jayne! To help her see me, I leant slightly over the rail. She illustrates the angle of the banister with her forearm and moves her head over as if to look down. I could see Lou's face below. She puts her other hand above her head as if to show the descending elevator. And I didn't realise that I had put my head in the path of the descending elevator. English chick, hand over mouth. Oh my God, moustache guy, whoa. Oh, more? Sorry, is that?
Yeah.
Oh, just a little more. Jayne. Luckily the lift stopped and I managed to pull my head out from beneath. Nadine, a miracle. English chick. I feel sick. The bookseller's daughter. How did the lift stop? Jayne. I don't actually know. French guy shaking his head. Always so many accidents in Paris in these old buildings. The bookseller's daughter. Unbelievable. English chick. Then what happened? Jayne. I don't know exactly. I blacked out and fell down the staircase. Up to speed.
So nice to relive, right?
Still to this day, I read it and even telling the story is weird, but even reading it is bizarre. It's just bizarre.
Yeah, it's such to actually be nearly beheaded is quite an unusual experience, really.
It is. There aren't many people in the world, I think, who could.
No.
Well, there are. I would like to know them.
And just a little writerly point here. What made you put a number of really interesting scenes like that in script form? And is it part to sort of put it out there to get it away from yourself, or was it just really funny to have mustache guy and?
Yeah, I mean,
What was the decision? How did you?
Yeah, I was definitely interested in this book. So in Paris or Die, Jayne goes to this theatre school in Paris, the Lecoq School, and I think, and now she's come out of the theatre school and she's in the world of actually being an actor. So I was kind of interested in not only what is her acting life now, other than, telling the story of her near decapitation, but also just the way that we perform when we've experienced great trauma. Well, actually in our everyday lives, from day to day, we do this all the time. How are you? I'm great. I was interested in the level of trauma of the accident and what that leads this character, Jayne, to how she performs in her life post the accident. And also how she's reading the world. So it's not just her speaking in theatrical language, it's people speaking back to her and other characters throughout the book performing essentially their roles, either in work or just, in the different situations.
Mm. And one of the things about this, I mean, you come back and the very first opening part of the book is you're walking down the street and you are so scared somebody's going to bump you because you've got your neck tightly wrapped in a scarf because it was broken and it's, you had a kind of a miracle save in a way. But you begin seeing things like you see the pot plants and you go, how is it those pot plants stay up there? Aren't they going to fall on somebody's head and kill them? Yeah. You have this fantastic, I'm just going to ask you to read another really, really quite hilarious one. You become obsessed with weird deaths. Were you obsessed with that before?
I was always interested in weird deaths. I always liked the odd spot at the bottom of the paper, like with the different sort of weird things that had happened, but definitely not to that extent. And I think that I was definitely searching for other stories that were as weird as mine in order to make me feel better, and especially deaths. So it made me feel better, and the whole. I think I was interested as well in the shock of the frail line with which we walk through our days. Every day, we walk, through Paris, through the streets, and there's all these pot plants above us, and how many people die every day by falling pot plant? I do really want to know. Has anyone died this year by falling pot plant? And the idea of things happening so suddenly and so quickly, and how you can be snuffed out like that. And that's because that's basically what happened to me. It seemed like I was almost snuffed out like that.
Yeah. Could you read? Yeah. It's so much fun. I just have to get Jayne to read whole bits of it. Beginning with Death by Flung Pear. To the page 78.
Yep.
To the bottom of that page.
Death by Flung Pear, by hockey puck, fold up bed, somersault, flying fire hydrant, office chair, beaver, falling cow, falling poodle named Catchy, who died too. Atomic wedgie. That's seriously true. There was someone who died by an atomic wedgie. I read about it. Cinema chair. Beach umbrella in strong wind. Death by hungry hippo. That happened to a friend of mine. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. Honeymoon on the Nile. A hippo literally jumped from the water and ate her friend's new husband. Ate him.
Yes, true.
Yeah, I laughed as well. It's terrible. It was unfathomable, and she forgave us our shocked laughter, having predicted it. She was like, "You're going to laugh when I tell you why I wasn't at school." And she said, "And I just want you to know I forgive you." And then she told us, and yeah, we laughed because it's a hippo. At that time, I'd never heard of hippos being dangerous either. They were these cute animals that, were on games that the cool kids had, hungry hippos, but they were hungry for human flesh. Who knew?
I'd never heard of one jumping up on a boat to eat someone's husband. That's quite special.
Actually, and no remain. Like there was only a few. It was terrible. I think we need to laugh. Is that?
The book is so full of little gems like this. Now, there is this thing that happens. So you come back and you've got this idea about making a play, and it's going to be put on in Portugal and then later in Paris. Tell us what happened. It was, and what I want to know is what it taught you, because you're so interested in theatre and you've studied it and you've acted and you were writing and you were going to write and direct. What did that experience, tell us about it, what did it teach you about theatre making that you hadn't known before? And particularly, you mentioned the Spanish poet Lorca's notion of duende. So tell us about that experience, because it is kind of funny too, even though it's terrible.
I think that coming into the Lecoq School, I'd come from a traditional theatre background in Melbourne, and it had been very much the actor learns to act and the director directs, and you start with a script and you work with a script and then you make a play. And then going to the Lecoq School, that was all broken down at where every Friday you would get up in a group that was like the Lord of the Flies. Every Friday, you'd have to choose a group. It was horrible. And you had a theme, and the Invisible Man. So they'd say groups of 5, the Invisible Man. And so you'd go off you'd be in this scrum and try and find people that you could work well with, and then get up on the Friday and do this play. And so there was no designated writer, there was no designated director, there was no, it was fight to the death to get your vision through. Push, pull, relent, give up, cry, spend all night making these pieces that would last for often, 30 seconds before they were bored and made you stop. But slowly we became very fluent after a year, 2 years of this, in this sort of, real socialist way of working where we all just there was no hierarchy. It would just happen that a piece of theatre would kind of be made. But it was short, they were only small pieces. So by the time we came out of the school and went off to make theatre, and especially if we worked together in groups, which is what I did. I went to Portugal to make a play with a group of girls that I'd worked really well with, and we were trying to make a full-length play. And it was really shocking because suddenly we're out in the world and we've got, the flyers are going up, tickets are being sold, we've got to make it this hour-long show. And I was still recovering from the accident, so I couldn't actually perform. I was too scared of being bumped and all that. So I decided I'd be the director and the writer. And they all agreed, and I said, you all need to agree that you're going to let me be the director and writer. And they went, okay. And I wasn't naturally the director, or I was doing a lot of writing, but I wasn't really the natural director in that group. There was one particular, the Portuguese girl, was very strong. She was often the director of that group. Anyway, so it was like watching... It was a 4-week process, and M came to do the sound and lights in about the mid of the second week and sort of watched what was going on. I was hunched in the back of the theatre in the dark, sort of calling out the odd thing, and the girls had actually started to turn their backs on me and work in their scrum way out of sheer terror and panic and gone back to the old methods of what they were doing. It was horrible, and I remember M coming in and saying, by the way, it's Matt, but it doesn't matter. It's M for the character for the book. Came in and said, what is going on here? This is... And so I stood up and started directing again, and then it was just gone. So it was an absolute disaster. And the actual play, I saw, it went up. I actually left. I committed the cardinal sin of leaving a theatre production, which the actors in the room are laughing because they know you never leave. You go down with the ship, And so it was terrible, and I left and didn't see the show in Portugal, but then the show came to Paris and I went along and saw it, and I remember sitting next to Claude, my teacher from Lecoq, and he was sitting there going, oh, mais non, mais, oh, il n'y a pas d'histoire, oh, mais c'est gratuit. And he'd say it out loud, you know, like, and everyone could hear. But people were literally, I think that they hadn't managed to sell many tickets, and I think they'd gone out in the street and started giving tickets out, and there were people heckling them from that, oh, mais non, ça pue! Like, if they had tomatoes, they would have thrown it at them. I felt it was awful, but it was a good lesson because I realised that you really do need a really strong script, and I'd left a lot of holes for the girls to work in, thinking that was the right thing to do. And you really did need that strong direction, and I was not that person at that stage. It was a hard lesson. And they all we all kind of got together and went, oh. And yeah, we got through it, but it was a good lesson in the power of writing, the power of a script, and the power of a good director.
Very interesting. And this M, so he's somebody who is a musician. He had been visiting you when you were in Melbourne at your dad's place recovering, and then he comes to do the music for this play. The two of you discover that you can solve a cryptic crossword together, and then you discover that you both like weird deaths. And which of those things was it, or was it just the sex that means that Matt is still your partner today?
Yeah, I just want to clarify actually why. I just thought I should just say why I called him M in the book, because he was never opposed to me calling him Matt or Jose, you know, anything. I could have called him anything, but I really I wanted him to not be Matt, because it isn't Matt. I can't recreate Matt. I wouldn't want to put that pressure on myself, just as much as I can't recreate myself in this memoir work, whatever it is. It was really, I think that what it was for us was time. Because yes, the cryptic crossword, yes, the sex, yes. Not that there was very much of that in the beginning, because I was in this neck cage girl, and I couldn't be touched for a very long time. I was so scared that if I moved, someone had yelled at me after the accident, telling me a story about the guy on the highway who has a massive car accident and gets out of the car and goes and says, I think you probably heard this, but he goes and knocks on the door and they say, where is the accident? And he goes, there. And he falls down dead because he did what I had done, but I managed to keep mine still. So I was always really scared of theatre, me doing something, or orgasm, what would my body do? So But with them, and then, but that was what it was as well, is that we had this time of being like an old couple. He would come to tea, and we would talk about the cryptic crossword, and we would look at books. He would bring music and films, and we had no relationship or anything like that in our minds at all. And that kept going. Neither of us wanted to leave that, because it was really nice to just, for the first time ever, not be thinking, oh, where is this leading? And, oh, we're living together. Oh, marriage, should we? Or no, we just... So the accident, which is, I suppose, the crux of My Sweet Guillotine in lots of ways, is that the guillotine really enabled a lot of things to develop that probably wouldn't have if life was normal.
As you can see, this is a book that goes everywhere. It goes... And it keeps coming back to everywhere. So it kind of goes everywhere, comes back to everywhere. So it's theatre, it's the accident, the aftermath, and the love story. You were just talking about, you just said something that reminded me of something that you write here, which is, I'm the Cate Blanchett of me, award-winning, able to disappear into each of my characters. How does she do it?
How does she remember all those lines?
How does she remember all those lines? How do you?
Yes, the lawyer had said to me that...
Oh, maybe we should
maybe I'll read that bit. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Okay, so that's page 114.
Yeah.
And from Hogarths Lift is fancy to... And you'd give me a third.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a really good passage, I think it's going to be.
I'll just read it without explaining. Hogarth's Lift is fancy, wide and fully enclosed. 6th floor. It seems dramatic to take the stairs, so I step inside. There's a safe feeling of opulence, spaciousness, the sheer weight of the construction. The metal gate jolts me when it clunks open outside the lawyer's door. I step gratefully out. A velvet lounge in a long white marble corridor. Receptionist. Il n'en est pas pour longtemps. I should run. Should I run? Squeeze the scarf. Jacques Lecoq. An actor should see the sea in the metro. Mum. Get in there, you wimp. The summer mum got the rash. The water in the holiday town was cold as melted ice. She always jumped straight in. You never regret a swim, only having not swum. My name is called. My heart pounds. Just pretend it's a role, I tell myself. Interior, Hogarth's office. Day. An opulent office the size of room 207 5 times over. Heavy parquetry floors, ornate windows, sumptuous carpets, mouldings, lamps. A huge mahogany desk floats in the middle of the room where a man sits hunched over a pile of papers. This is Jonathan Hogarth. He speaks with a booming British voice. Hogarth. Pleased to meet you. He stands to pump my hand. His wealth is reassuring. The long ironed cuffs with silver links in the shape of bells, the wide silver wedding band, a heavy silver watch, the long fingers with the remnants of a tan. I bet he lives in St. Cloud with a pool. Jane. Thanks for meeting with me. He gestures for me to sit, then goes to the high windows that look out over the tree-lined avenue and starts pacing. You know, I've seen a lot of stupid Australians. Tourists mainly. They come here, step off the bus, look the wrong way, get hit by cars. Happens all the time. But this accident of yours, I've never heard anything like it. Right. As I said to your husband, boyfriend, whatever he is, on the phone, there's no money in it. I'd take your case, which means nothing but a small fee up front, but still. They don't cover suffering here. It's not America, Australia. Every single euro must be accounted for and justified. A painful process. Perhaps you'd recover your costs and a bit more if you're lucky. Is it worth it? They're bastards. They'll make you cry. You've lived here a while now. You know the paperwork. Do you? Do you really? You'll have to dress up and act sad and go on and on about your ruined career, your ruined face. Let me look at it. Yes, not that ruined, is it? You're alive. You're fine. You could still act. You can still do whatever you want, honestly. If I were you, I'd get out of my office and never look back. Go on with your life. Forget about all this. Thank you. I'm not sure if I can just move on as if nothing's happened. What about other people? What if the same thing happens to someone else? This is Paris. It's a very particular city, and this is a very particular accident. It's an old city, and it has its own rules. You must know how dangerous so many things are here every day. You know your case isn't going to make a lick of difference to the way things operate. It will make a difference to me. Would it make a difference to me? What if I decide to go ahead with the lawsuit? Hogarth sighs, like his preliminary spiel is over, and now he's moving on to phase 2. Well, you'd have to put all those acting skills to use. The life you've lost, your career. No lipstick, bad clothes, you are ruined. Everything would have to be documented. You'd need to see psychiatrists, psychologists, doctors, and get them to say how badly you're suffering PTSD. You'll need to get your acting teachers and colleagues to write letters saying you were on the rise and that now you're ruined as your face can't express emotion. And you're physically unable to use your body in the same way you did before. You'd have to act, ham it up for all those people and collect a big fat dossier for us to present to court. Now, if you could convince them that you are the next Kate Blanchett, and now you're a hopeless case who is going to require care for the rest of your life. He looks into the distance, gesturing dramatically with his perfect suited arm. A rising star, cut down in her prime. The number might look more like this. He takes the paper and writes a number on it, then emphatically adds a large 0. And you'd give me a third.
I love Hogarth. He does come good in the end.
He does. He comes backstage just at the right moment.
Yes, because somebody else does die.
Yes. So I decided not to do the lawsuit because I went along to meet this lawyer and he told me everything, all of this, and I decided that I didn't have the strength or the desire to put myself through it, and why anyway. And I love Paris. I love the dangerosity of Paris, the dangerousness, the ridiculous flights of stairs that are falling down, trying to walk across the street with a green man and, you would never do that and think you're going to survive. I love that about Paris. So it seemed ridiculous to do it. But then I learned that a boy who lived in basically exactly the same kind of building as the place where my accident happened. I found out later, they were very rare, these buildings. He'd actually been decapitated by a lift in exactly the same circumstances as me. But he actually lived in the building. So it was very strange. He lived in this, it was in the 17th arrondissement, and it was the same kind of Art Deco building. And he was walking upstairs to tell his mum that he was going to watch the football game downstairs, and his friend called him from down below, just like, what happened to me? And he just leaned over. He'd probably done that before in his building, but just, it was dead. It was silent like mine, and just, so that provoked me to think, well, if not for myself, maybe. But it was for myself as well, because it was, I guess in some way, I thought that what had happened was really stupid. It was absolutely my own fault. But then after that happened, I thought, oh, maybe, it wasn't my fault, and maybe it could happen to someone else. And it would feel weird to go through my life and not do something about it. To sue is stupid. I didn't care about, there is a moment in the book where I say, oh my God, maybe I'll be rich. Maybe I'll get $1 million and I'll won't have to teach English to businessmen anymore.
So you wiped off the lipstick, you got some pretty bad clothes.
I played the role, and it was dangerous for my psyche. It was a dangerous thing to do, because I suppose I was okay. I was damaged, of course, as anybody would be. But really, I can move, and the surgeon did the most incredible job on my face. I was so grateful. So, yeah. Can't remember what my point was, but
that doesn't matter.
Yeah. I just laughed.
What you were just saying about Paris is it's so dangerous, and yet it's so wonderful like that. I remember there was a passage in there where you talked about going back, and it's like, oh, nobody's allowed to smoke inside anymore. And you said, it's terrible. You hate it. You don't get the romantic haze, and you can smell things.
Yes. Things you don't. Do you remember that? The things you don't want. I remember being in Ireland as well, and being in a pub and being like, oh my God, I can smell burps and farts. Before, it was at least the horrendous heady fragrance of... But yeah, it was an interesting moment where the smoking ban came in Paris, because it was impossible to imagine. And it was suddenly, just, you could see the floors, and you could see, and the whole demographic in the restaurants and bars changed, and it was sad in lots of ways, because it was such a cultural part. I remember hearing about the tabac in the countryside. They all had to shut down because the men who would come in and bet and drink and smoke in the bar, they just wouldn't come out because they couldn't smoke. It was such a social part of their... So a lot of that whole cultural aspect was wiped out.
But you love Paris anyway.
Yeah, I do.
Despite everything. At one point, the love story with Paris runs through both of these books, and it's so strong. And at one point, you and Em are discussing staying in Paris, and he says, she wants me to stay, the she being Paris, and you reply, yeah, she does that, the little minx, and then she gets you into a headlock. And he says, I think I love her too, and you say, the slut. So what is it besides what is the je ne sais quoi about Paris that you love so much? What is it? Can you put it into words?
Yeah, it's a funny thing, because strangely, quite a lot of people I remember people saying, why would you go back after that happened? And I remember finding it quite a strange question because I'm just going to seg really briefly and talk about this book I just read about a woman who gets attacked by a bear, that beautiful French book by Nastasia Martin. And the first thing she does after she's mauled by a bear, she's an anthropologist in Siberia. Alaska, Siberia. Anyway, the first thing she does after she's pieced back together is go running back to the mountain. She just goes straight back. It's her, and people are like, her mother is like, why? And she's like, no, I need to go back. And it was, for me, it's such a strange thing to say, but the whole experience of the accident and the hospital and the ambulance men, and it was another exciting cultural moment in France, it's such I know that sounds insane, but I have this desperate desire, and I think this came, I think, from grief, from having arrived in Paris after the loss of my mum quite soon after that, and arriving and desperately wanting to completely start a new life, start completely from the beginning, almost die. I feel like I killed a part of myself and arrived. And I just remember being in the Rue du Faubourg Saint-Denis, just surrounded by, it wasn't French culture, it was this mix of cultures, and it was so heady, and I felt so lost inside of it, and it was just such a beautiful feeling. And I felt this, like the arms of Paris in some way just wrap themselves around me. And that feeling just never left. And even with the accident, there's this sense, I never had a feeling of, oh, fuck, Paris, nearly killed me. It's a sense of, she's kind of laughing. She's kind of like, how do you find that little one, there's more things that actually, more challenging things that happened in Paris in my life. There's more stories to tell. That wasn't the only one, that was one. But yeah, there's something about, I think it's just that feeling of another culture, another country, when you are feeling really lost, can just become, it could have been anywhere that I arrived at that point, and I would have probably absorbed, like a mother figure, that place. And I still feel like that. I'm not living between two countries despite that introduction anymore because of the pandemic, and it's been really like having not seen my mum for 2 years. It's painful.
And yet at the same time, you can never really, I know when I first went to China, I wanted to be Chinese. That was my thing. I was really proud of myself if I had like 2 months where I didn't speak any English, I was like, yay, I'm Chinese almost, but I was never Chinese, of course. And you have this thing with Paris, where you say, there's a part where you and Em are sitting at a cafe and you're like people watching, and you're saying, we're looking at all the people and we're going, those are the French people we want to be. And yet in Paris or Die, there's this wonderful passage where you talk about how every time you walk into a patisserie or anything, you're not getting it because you're smiling too much. And somebody says that you'll never be, truly Parisian unless you can wipe that Australian smile out of your voice. And so how do you see yourself, how do you negotiate this other culture that you'll never be truly part of, and yet attracts you so much, and you feel part of it in a funny way? I'm very interested because of my problem.
Well, you would understand. Yeah, it's interesting. I love that you desperately wanted to become a Chinese person.
A lot harder than you becoming French.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, yes, but it's so funny because I remember being in Paris or Die, there is this story about when I ask a guy in the toilet for some toilet paper, and I say it in what I think is perfect French, and he answers me back in English, and I say, but how did you know I wasn't French? And he's like, the smile in the voice. And I remember being absolutely perplexed and devastated about this thing, and trying every which way to iron the fucking Australian out of my everything. And I remember the character of Adrian saying to me, no, you need to speak flatter, like stop being so passionate, it's like water, bonjour, saying bonjour, 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 bonjour. He's like, no, you still have the smile. It's like, bonjour, bonjour. I still, and then anyway, over the years, I was desperate in that period, in those first 2 years that Paris or Die is set, to become French. I wanted to become French. I thought I could. I thought I could sit in the metro and hold my mouth like this. I started to realise that I didn't come across as French because they could see. And I would look around the metro cabin and I'd be like, French, French, French. Oh, not French. Because he's got a little... Absolutely no way. And so I tried desperately, like walk down the street, blank look and never look up at pretty things and all this sort of stuff. I'm trying desperately. And then, but that was, it's been, that was sort of going back to 2004 and now over a period of 15 years of working in working in advertising agencies. I remember for so many years as well, like desperately trying to hide everything about myself. Not Australian, didn't have a kid, didn't just wanting to go in and be, I'd wear the perfect outfit so that they couldn't see, like I'd study what everyone wore and everything. Over time, and it's hilarious because no one ever for a second thought that I was French. I never, even people, when I'd quiz them, I'd say, but, I don't have an accent, right? And they'd be like, oh, so cute. You have this little, are you German or Swedish or maybe, not really Australian often. But over time, now I realise, and I remember someone saying to me once, like, why are you so desperate to sort of change cultures? And I didn't really know why. And then it started to occur to me what a beautiful place it is actually being between cultures, like not being in another country, but not being that culture, the freedom that comes with that. And I'd be in advertising meetings and I wouldn't know a word, whereas in the past I would die if I couldn't remember a word. Now I just say it in English, Australian. And they're like, because it's cool now as well. English and being Australian is kind of cool. So yeah, I don't try to be French anymore. Oh, it's so cute.
For the record, I don't try to be Chinese anymore either.
Okay. But you speak Chinese like, well, to my ear. But you probably think it's
to her ear. She speaks French.
Yeah. We just speak to each other, and I'll imagine that you're Chinese. French.
I have so many more questions, but I'm sure you do too. So I want to open it up. If you have a question, shout it out, and then I'm going to repeat it for and then So raise your hand. Yes.
So, was your brush with death life reaffirming? And if it was, did that impact last for long, or did this dissipate?
Was your brush with death life affirming? And if it was, what was the second part of the question?
Did it dissipate over time?
Did it dissipate over time?
Yeah, it was so beautiful. I know that everybody says they see the light and all that sort of stuff. I had this amazing dream and I could see, the girl's face ahead of me and my mum was there and Adrian was there and it was such a beautiful, and I just remember, and all through the experience, going into the hospital and everything, just the most beautiful shock, what shock does. I didn't have any pain for a while, for a long time. And I think I already was really, because I feel like I kind of died, I'd started this new life at the beginning of arriving in Paris. It wasn't that sense of, oh, I'm going to change my life now. You know how some people say they weren't happy and they didn't realise, and now they wake up, they have a heart attack and they, split up with their wife and have a new life. Or I didn't really have that. I actually went back and kept living the life that I was living before. So it didn't dissipate though. There definitely is a sense of reaffirmed knowledge that any moment the pot plant could, or Catchy the poodle could fall out of the of the balcony. And I love that. I think I kind of had it before as well, because I'd had the shock of my mum getting, being told that she was sick in such a brutal way, just the absolute shock that So I'd had my world kind of fall apart before, and then so shock was not altogether unusual.
And yet, one of the questions that I was going to ask was, when you were recovering at your dad's, you write about feeling this enormous, immense joy and peace.
Yeah.
So you said that you felt like you were the luckiest person in the world.
Yeah, sometimes, just to be able to stop. We were always going, and I think that I remember people so my whole life I'd been living in Paris. I'd found an apartment. Basically, my life was packed up, and shipped back to Australia, and I was living with my grieving dad in his new little seaside house, and in a bedroom with the sort of dad scratchy sheets, those ones that they buy. I think it had Kendone on it and stuff. He'd bought it especially for me. And he was living very simply, and I just was so happy. I think I was tired of trying to act like everything was all right all the time when it really wasn't.
And you were in a cage.
And I was in a cage. The cage was pretty bad, but just the sort of simplicity of just stopping and being. people were sort of worried and felt sorry for me, or ringing me up and saying, I'm so sorry about what happened, and I was like, it's amazing. I get to, I'm home. I get to lie here and think, and and just stop. I just don't think we have that many opportunities. I felt like an opportunity to just enjoy being. And after the accident, not knowing if I would walk, or that sort of those moments where you don't know what's going on. I remember being in this room with the pizza oven when they were going to put me in the thing to do the X-rays and stuff, and just feeling this ecstasy of just lying there. Maybe I'd had morphine by then, I don't know, but just this ecstasy of lying and just feeling my heartbeat, and just being. I remember thinking, if this is it, and that. Sorry to go on, but that really healed me. That idea, because I'd thought about watching my mum die. I think I'd been so worried and sad about what had been happening to her, and I saw in those moments why she tried to hold on, because even though her life had become, bedridden, that there was so much beauty in that stillness as well. Maybe she was, I think sometimes that haunts you, haunted me, that idea of the sort of nothingness, but actually in the nothingness is just the amazing feeling of simply being alive. Yeah, something.
Question?
I was curious about your use of the word characters to describe yourself and Em when you're talking about your book. And both books are very intensely personal, both in describing actions and thoughts and feelings. Is that a kind of technique you used when you were writing to distance yourself? Sort of thinking of characters rather than thinking of the book about being about yourself?
The question is, in both books, you talk about yourself in terms of characters. And is this a way of distancing yourself from what you're talking about?
Yeah, I think it's... I just kind of did what felt right. It didn't feel right to me. I don't feel like it's... this happened 15 years ago. These stories are from 10, 15 years ago, so they feel like she feels like a character because she's a young Jayne. And as I'm writing, I guess I don't really think anyone's would really be interested in my story. When you're growing up and you're like, everyone's like, oh, who cares about your story? Actually, when I first started writing this book, Paris or Die, I remember saying to Dad saying to me, what are you writing about? And I said, oh, I'm just writing about Paris. And he said, what things that have happened to you? And I said, yeah. And he goes, who wants to read that? And it was mortifying. And I thought, yeah, true. So I think maybe there's a part of that feeling of, well, if the character lives, then it's not so much just my story. And I want it to read like a novel. I really was always on the fence whether these are autofiction novels or whether they're memoirs. It used to plague me. I don't care so much anymore. I just let it be what it is, somewhere in between. But yeah, it definitely does provide a sense of creation into it that's not... and also it helps me avoid that, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. in order to craft something that hopefully stands on its own without it being, so much because in the writing, you can't just write that either. It doesn't work. It needs more creation around it, so it becomes something else. She is really someone else, and so is M. As I wrote him, even though most of the things are, it's true, all the events are true. As I write him, he sort of starts to become someone else. And he was saying the other day, he even sees M as someone else. He looks a bit different, and he sort of holds himself a bit differently. And that was in order to get the narrative working, I suppose.
More questions? Yes.
Did you fly back from Paris to Australia in the cage?
Did you fly back from Paris to Australia in the cage?
Yeah, I did, and it was the flight. What do you call it? The travel agent back in Australia organised. It was quite like it was almost like a heist or something. I had to get picked up by the ambulance. At that point I could only be laying down. I wasn't allowed to sit up in a car in case there was this. So I had to lie down on the back seat. They had to be taken by an ambulance. But the travel agent said to me, try and get an upgrade based on, feeling sorry for you, but not too much, because if they think you're not well enough, they won't put you on the flight. So the ambulance drops us off like a bit down the road so that we can't be seen being dropped off. My sister's got me and walking up to the thing. And I say, thanks, we've got any chance of maybe an upgrade? And they're like, oh, we'll check. And so there wasn't a chance of an upgrade. So I was sort of relieved, because I was actually at that point terrified that they wouldn't let me on the flight. But this is the cruel part. They put me right at the front of economy, where you can see the bastards through in business class. And I had a little shit behind me kicking my back the whole way to Dubai. So I'm like... And then I've got the guy up front just like lying back. And I'm in this thing, like, and because it came quite far around, so I kind of was sort of half forward. Like, that was pretty traumatic. And then in Dubai, I remember my sister, we were in, in Dubai, they've got those places with the sort of leather lounge suites and stuff. It's really weird. And people kind of sit there in the sun's beating down, and we managed to find a little, like, kind of weird reclining seat. I just remember, it was the longest flight of my life. I'll never forget it. And Dad at the airport.
God. Yes.
How much French did you have when you arrived in Paris? How long did it take you to become fluent so that people could understand what you were saying and not say it in English?
How fluent? How much French did you know when you arrived in Paris for the first time, and how long did it take until people wouldn't listen to you and respond in English?
I first went to Paris when I was 22 after I'd finished university, and I'd studied it through school and uni. But when I first arrived, it's like I'd never been taught how to speak. I was, bonjour, je voudrais une baguette, s'il vous plaît. No one says je voudrais. I don't know no one says it. You say, bonjour, une baguette, s'il vous plaît. You don't say je voudrais. If you're ordering a dinner, you don't say je voudrais. You straight away, anyway, you're taught to say those things. So, and that trip, I just communicated I was too shy, I just communicated with English language nannies and everything. And then when I went back to go to the Lecoq school, I still had really schoolgirl French, which really helped me get through. But where you were thrown at that school into 100% hurricane French. So there were people at the school who didn't speak a single word, who would cry, what are they saying? After the first or second week, they said, alors, plus de traduction. No more translation. Because everyone's sort of sitting there like, And I remember this Israeli girl, and I'd go, I can't understand the word, I know. But I remember them saying, start to learn with your back. Start to learn with your back, whatever that meant. Learn with your body. And it was true. After 6 months, everybody was fluent, even if they were sort of like, je fais ça. But also I went out with a French guy who didn't speak really any English, and straight away we started speaking French, and I desperately wanted to be speaking French. So I would recommend, if you're going to learn the language, get a French boyfriend that doesn't speak English, or girlfriend, and go to a really grueling theatre school, or any school. Yeah, it's sink or swim.
We probably have time for one last question. Anyone? Good.
Oh, Agathe, I hope I haven't offended you. Agathe est française, and I do make all these, and Yann at the back there, I make all these generalisations about les Français.
If she hasn't already done so, when your daughter reads the books, what do you hope she gets out of them?
If she hasn't already done so, when your daughter reads your books, what do you hope she gets out of them?
Probably watching the live stream. Hi, Frankie.
Hi, Frankie. I've met her.
Yeah, Mummy said the F word again. Yeah, that's terrifying, but also a driving factor of both these books. My mum was this very reserved woman, very graceful. She didn't swear. She just and I just really desperately wanted to know more about her. I wish I remember asking her, about her life, but I was too young, and so I think that I'm driven by a desire for Frankie as much as she's like, to really know me, and she will know me through these books, even though they are Jayne and M. So I think I'm always mostly nervous about her reading about the accident and knowing about the accident, which is so traumatic. But actually, she's a very mature, resourceful little thing, and she's slowly figured out the story and asked a lot about it anyway. And she's asked if she can read the books, and I've said, no, I'll read you chapters. And she's been like, okay. And she's like, I don't want to read them anyway. But one day she will, and I just hope that for her, at least she has too much information rather than not enough.
Which is a fantastic note to end on. Before I ask you to thank Jayne for this wonderful conversation, I want to remind you that she'll be signing books out there. So when you want to sort of mob her, please do it out there in the bookshop area, whatever we call it. But thank you so much, Jayne, for a brilliant conversation. Let's give her a round of applause.